Is the mixtape era dead? While creating the foundation for rappers such as T.I. to Drake, these days, you don't really hear about mixtapes anymore.
Does that mean that mixtapes are no longer a thing?
Way back in the 80s, home-recorded albums were passed out on cassette tapes before CDs and later MP3s came out. Vinyl was still around, but the hot new technology was magnetic tape wound around a couple of spools that you could listen to on a Walkman or in your beat-up Chevy. Wikipedia says, in hip-hop and R&B culture, a mixtape often describes a self-produced or independently released album issued free of charge to gain publicity or avoid possible copyright infringement. However, the term has been applied to a number of releases published for profit in the 2010s, and the line between a release billed as a mixtape and the one referred to as a studio album or extended play has become increasingly blurred.
Let's go back to before the introduction of the audio cassette. The creation of pop music compilation required specialized or cumbersome equipment such as an 8-track recorder, and that was often inaccessible to the casual music fan. As cassette tapes and recorders grew in popularity, so did mixtapes. One could say that the popularity of mixtapes only happened because the cassette tape was invented.
Would we even have mixtapes like Lil Wayne's dedication series if the Sony Walkman wasn't invented in 1979? It makes you think. In the 1970s, DJs like Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, African Bambaataa, and Soulsonic Force to Kool Herc and the Herculoids, as well as DJ Hollywood, would often distribute recordings of their club performances via audio cassette. And in the 1980s, mixtapes had also changed in definition, as now the remix or the mashup is another version of a mixtape. The switch-ups between songs, which the end of one song would blend with the beginning of the next song, actually came from the use of song loops and rap tracks and DJ turntablisms.
And then in the mid-1990s, rave and dance mixtapes were very popular. The regulation was very relaxed, as the DJs themselves, and they played and mixed songs from other artists without paying the royalties. If we fast forward to the early 2000s, New York's 50 Cent and DJ Who Kid helped to build the traditional mixtape model. As is commonly understood, one artist raps and freestyles over pre-existing popular beats and then self-releases the project. Lil Wayne was by far the most aggressive in mixtape releases. In the 21st century, mixtapes and hip-hop are typically released as holdovers or low-key releases between studio albums. Underground or unsigned artists typically release them free online on websites such as Soundcloud, LiveMixtapes, HotNewHipHop, or DatPiff, while prominent industry artists may release commercial mixtapes on streaming services.
Are mixtapes dead? Let's check Google Trends. From the time that Google was alive, 2004 to present, the popularity of the search term mixtape rose and fell, peaking in the 2010s until December 2012, mirroring the rise and the fall of the SoundCloud era rappers. Streaming in general and the playlist era took over. Albums were a barrier to enter the music industry, and mixtapes came out of necessity because artists didn't have the money to produce a studio album. It's kind of a paradox. Just as the rise of the cassette tape technology led to mixtapes becoming popular on Sony Walkmans, the opposite happened as digital music became more accessible. The mixtape era started to decline, or mutate and change in meaning, like Drake's commercial mixtapes that weren't really mixtapes.
As we watch the rise from the 80s to the present, did mixtapes become more popular than albums, or did something else happen?
Most millennials remember making mixtapes or seeing them as a form of sharing music you want others to hear, or even a form of courtship, as guys would often make mixtapes to give to girls they were trying to date. Even the hit 90s television show Friends, in one episode, Chandler, may he rest in peace, forgot to get Monica an anniversary gift and uses a mixtape his ex-girlfriend made for him as Monica's present. It all falls apart when the whiny voice of Chandler's ex-girlfriend comes on the tape, but I digress. In the 90s, the Napster and LimeWire era created a whole new form of mixtapes through illegally downloaded songs onto CDs that replaced the cassettes. Did CDs and MP3 players change something vital about the mixtape crowd?
And did the SoundCloud era lead to an increased interest in mixtapes? Did that last? Mixtapes are also a story of the fans, the serious ones. The golden age began with the internet as die-hard hip-hop heads waded through dubious-looking files and mixtape warehouses like Dat Piff in search of buried gems. The tastemakers of the 2000s and 2010s turned new jacks into legends overnight, leaving MCs to battle for their attention in the wild west of uncleared samples and shady rights situations. The artists who found ways to thrive in that environment are now household names.
Kendrick Lamar, surprisingly enough, released prophetic lines in his mixtape Overly Dedicated, where he rapped on the Heart Part 2, "I pray these bars get further than Compton." The raw energy here is almost palpable as K-Dot defines his style for the first time, and it makes you really say, can Drake do something like that, or does he have the heart? So, is the mixtape dead, or is it just going to transform into something new? We're from the jump. Subscribe.